Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to take a very quick look at the game Doomworks. Now this is a card game for 2 to 5 players, ages 10 and up, with the average playtime clocking in around 25 to 40 minutes. In this game, each player will be attempting to build a doomsday device, with the intent on earning the most victory points. Let's just take a quick moment to look at the components and see how the game is played. Now the game comes with a total of 3 different decks of cards, 2 of which are component decks, and 1 of which is a scientist deck. Now the components deck with the darker back here are made up of various machine front and back cards. Basically each player will be receiving 1 machine front and 1 machine back card. And each machine, either front or back card, has some sort of special condition listed on the bottom that will award victory points to that player at the end of the game should they fulfill this particular objective. Now the component cards with the lighter back are also made up of component cards. However, think of the ones with the darker backs, the machine front and back cards, as your shell, and think of these cards with the lighter backs as your internal components. Each component card with the lighter backs here have a cost associated with them along the top. This is basically the kind of scientist cards that will need to be played in order to make these components active. There's a point value in the upper right hand corner for scoring, and along the bottom there's also some special abilities that players can observe should this component become active during the game. Finally, you have this scientist deck off to the right-hand side, and these are made up of various scientist cards of varying colors. And basically, these cards will be played throughout the game in order to make these components with the lighter backs active. Now, some of these scientist cards have some special abilities listed on them, like this is a Doombringer scientist. Just to sum that up real quick, Doombringers can actually bring an end to the game before any of the players manage to build their machine. If enough of these Doombringers enter play, then the game automatically ends. There's also, I believe, a Saboteur card somewhere in this deck. Here's one. Basically, Saboteur cards can be played on enemy component cards that are active in order to make them inactive, and actually serves to give them negative points at the end of the game should the Saboteur card still be there. Now, this deck also includes some of these Guardian cards, and think of these cards as extra special ability cards that can be played on your own device. Basically, these not only give you extra points during the end of the game, but they also serve to protect you from enemy Saboteur cards. During the game setup, each player is going to be receiving 1 of these machine front and machine back cards. And again, those are the cards with the darker backs associated with them. Each player is also going to be receiving 5 of these component cards with the lighter backs. And just basically to sum up this process, each player is going to choose 1 card, keep it, and then pass their entire hand off to the next player clockwise. And this will continue with players choosing a card and passing the hand around until each player is left with 5 cards again. And after that, each player will just simply deal these 5 cards beneath, let's see if I can stretch these out, beneath their machine front and machine back cards like so. Now, at this point in the game, it's worth mentioning a few key terms. The area between the machine front and the machine back cards, this is known as the active zone. This is where components will eventually end up as they are activated by these various scientist cards. The row right below the active zone is the inactive zone. Once each player has their active and inactive zones all situated the correct way, each player will be dealt a total of 3 of these scientist cards in order to form their starting hand. And the first player is just simply chosen at random, either via the best evil laugh or rock, paper, scissors, whatever the case may be. Now, a player can take a total of 2 actions on their turn, and the number of actions available to a player is actually pretty varied, so I'll try and sum these up as best I can. The first action that a player can take on their turn is just to simply draw from the draw deck or take a card from the top of this discard pile. Now, if a player is trying to take a mad scientist or a wild card from the top of the discard pile, that will take up both of their actions. A wild card basically can be any color that the player wants it to be. It could be red, purple, green, whatever the case. Now, the second action that a player can take on their turn is to assign scientist cards from their hand onto these inactive components in order to make them active. To do that, a player will need to take a look at the requirements listed on the top of these various component cards. This one in particular requires 3 of these purple scientists. So the player will need to take a look at their hand, see if they have enough to fulfill that requirement. In this case, the player has 4 of these purple cards along with a wild card. So in effect, the player has a total of 5 scientist cards that are purple. Now, this player is going to go ahead and choose 3 of them. Let's just go ahead and choose these 3. And normally they would just be placed into the discard pile. Now, in this case, though, there is a Doombringer card. As I mentioned earlier, the Doombringer cards will force the game's end prematurely. These cards are placed off to the side when played. And if enough of these cards enter play, then the game automatically ends. The rest of these cards will be discarded as normal. Now that those cards have been discarded, that component can go from the inactive zone to the active zone. And any special ability listed on the bottom of the card here can be observed throughout the game. In this case, this is a continuous effect. You may look at the top card of the draw pile before you draw. So that's a pretty powerful special ability there. The third action that a player can take on their turn is the Assign a Saboteur card. And all that entails is taking one of these Saboteur cards from your hand and placing it onto an enemy active component. It doesn't have to be of the same color, mind you. In this case, the component is green and the Saboteur card is purple. Now, in this case, the purple Saboteur card negates the active effect listed there, so that player can no longer make use of that particular active component. At the end of the game, if the Saboteur card is still there, the player will actually earn some negative points. So you're going to want to try and get rid of these as soon as possible. Speaking of which, let's just say that there's a Saboteur card there. Now, on your turn, you can also play cards from your hand to remove an enemy Saboteur card, and that costs 1 action to do so. You can either discard 1 card of the same color to get rid of it. In this case, this player has a yellow card in their hand, and they could play it to negate that and discard them both. Or they can play 2 cards of varying colors in order to get rid of it. In this case, the player is just going to go ahead and do this. 1 for 1. The final action a player can take on their turn is to play these Guardian cards. And again, the Guardian cards are part of the Scientist deck. And to play a Guardian card, you just simply place it above your active row here. And I know there's not a lot of room here, so normally there would be more space for both. But you get the idea. The Guardian cards are just simply played above the active row. And these do a number of different things. Let's just say that this component was active. This is a red component and this is a red Guardian. If the opponent were to try and play a Saboteur on this active component, this Guardian would protect them, protect this particular component. Now, if the Saboteur card was played on the purple card instead, this red Guardian would not be able to stop that. This player over here would need a purple Guardian in order to stop Saboteur cards that are played on purple components. At the end of the game, these Guardian cards also serve to give that player a particular set of bonus points, which I'll explain in a bit. Now, players will continue taking turns back and forth until one of 2 game-ending conditions are met. If a player manages to completely build or construct their Doomsday device by making all of their inactive components active, that will end the game. If enough of these Doombringers enter play, that will also end the game prematurely, whether or not a player has actually constructed their Doomsday device. Now, at the game's end, all of the inactive components are placed off to the side. There's no penalty for having inactive components, you just simply don't score on them. Now, the first thing that the players will need to do is add up the number of points in the top right-hand corner of their active components, and then subtract 2 points for every Saboteur card that is on their active components. After that, players will need to take a look at their machine front and machine back cards to see if they've scored any bonus points. In this case, score 5 points if you did not play any Guardians during the game. Well, there's 2 right there, so there's no victory points or bonuses for that. This other one here, you score 1 point for each engineering component in your machine. The engineering are blue components. So the player would earn 1 point for having that as a bonus. And then finally, the player will need to take a look at their Guardians. Each player will earn 1 point for every Guardian they have. In this case, there's 2 here, so the player would earn 2 points. And the player would also earn a bonus of 1 victory point for every matching component card of that type. In this case, the player has a red Guardian and a red component, so the player would also earn another victory point for having that. Now, there are no yellow cards here, so the player would not earn any extra bonus points for having a yellow Guardian, just the 1 bonus point for having it in the first place. And once players are done adding up all of those different ways to earn victory points, they'll take a look at their totals, and the player with the most will win the game. And there you have it. That's just a very quick look at the game Doomworks. I didn't cover all of the rules found in the manual, but this should just give you the general idea on how the gameplay flows. You can check out my review at www.dadsgamingaddiction.com, or you can simply click on the link in the below description that'll take you there as well. This is Vince, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.